kyo nam myoho renge kyo nam myoho renge kyo.
Hello again. Okay, this next paragraph, I've already done this, but silly me, I did not click the record switch. So, as you know, I don't rehearse any of this stuff or write it down. So, I'll just get into it. The Great Wisdom Sutra says, quote, "When one regards whatever teaching one hears, like what we're doing right now, either secular or Buddhist, as an expedient means, in other words, everything we study and experience in our lives, are a device, a mental device, for us to understand more deeply our human experience." Okay? One is brought to understand that these can be incorporated into the profound principles that prajna or Buddha wisdom alone can grasp. When, with the same wisdom, one understands that all secular matters and actions represent the essential nature of things, one will see not a thing that is outside that essential nature. So this is another way of saying that everything we experience is, by its nature, enlightenment. Let me try to flip that again so that it makes hopefully more sense and less confusing. Our experience, you and I, as humans, of our lives, the world around us, the worlds around us is very much at play here. What Buddhism is saying is that our condition of humanity is to perceive the individuation, the particularness of people, places, and things, right? Our lives are noun propent. We perpetuate nouns. Now I'm getting a little abstract, so let me bring it back to center. You perceive a self because the self is something you differentiate from everything else. This is our primary step into thingness, what I call thingness, or what Buddha might call suchness. That's not actually very... Moving on. So thingness. But by attaching ourselves to the ideas that this is a bookshelf, this is a book, this is a Sylvain, you are you, so on and so forth, we create this immense database of what it is to be self, what it is to be human, what it is to be alive. But the more we study, the more we discover that our studies are not in and of themselves specific other things, but that they are aids to help us realize things about our self, our thingness, our particular bag of thingness. And we each have one. And they're not all the same. They're all similar, but they're all very different because we accrue our ideas of the world around us in our own particular way and in a cumulative way. So what this is saying is, if you look at enlightenment, awakening, as a particular state of mind that is clear, in other words, unattached or clear of all of those, that entire database, but doesn't get rid of the database, is able to look at the database objectively as these are no longer things I'm attached to, but things that lead me to understand that they are of my own conjecture, my own perception, my own experience of the world around me is something that is my experience, a mental exercise. It doesn't mean that the bookshelf doesn't exist. I'm talking about a mental exercise here, and this is what Buddhism is all about. If you understand that everything you experience is a result of your own perceptions, your own experience, and I don't want to use, you may say of your own making, but the verbs, language falls apart very easily here, because to make is to imply that things are used to put together another thing. We don't want to go there. What we want to say is our experience of thingness is ours to perceive. And therefore, if we understand that all of our world around us is not something that is unique to us, but something that provides us a human experience, then we kind of flip the script a little bit and we start to see with clarity how the human perception, all of us, not just me and you, is a construct of these experiences and perceptions. And therefore, if we dig deep at that and we study and study to unlock those little doors that many of which we're not conscious of, aware of all the time, that our awareness will grow to encompass all of it. And this is where the equanimity in Buddhism comes in. It's a higher mind state. It's a higher mind experience. It's a mental clarity, clear of the obstacles of attachment, of signifying mine, yours, I, and other. That it's all the same experience, albeit through myriad lenses. Our own lenses, which are constantly shifting, let alone everyone else's, right? So this is, I hope this helps point you more in the right direction of this mental clarity that is the Buddha mind, right? So this is what he's saying here. The first volume of the Mahavairocana Sutra states, quote, Master of Secrets, Vajrasattva, there is a great vehicle practice that arouses the mind, that is without attachment to things, and leads one to understand that all phenomena are without individual natures. See, the bookcase does not exist because it says, I am a bookcase. It doesn't have its own nature. It doesn't spring forth from the universe, I am bookcase. Bookcase is a perception we apply to it. And if we can see that in action, we start to understand that the bookcase is there as a reminder that we have placed it. We have identified it. And by identifying it, we identify ourself, which therefore breaks down. This is the whole self, no non-self, no, so on and so forth. This is the mental exercise, right? Why is this? Because in past times, those who practiced this way were able to observe the ayala consciousness within the 5 components, skandhas, and to realize that individual natures are illusory. The same sutra also says, Master of Secrets, these men in this way cast aside the concept of non-self and came to realize that the mind exists in a realm of complete freedom, and that the individual mind has from the beginning never known birth or death. This is why this Gosho is so profound. Because if you're anything like me, and I think that you are, every sentence of this, every paragraph, as they accumulate especially, will send you into a desire to do more research, more study. It's so dense with information here that I'm even struggling trying to find a way to simplify it or clarify it for you and I to gain access to what is actually the meaning of these words. So if you, again, to continue with my earlier example, if your mental exercise shows you the clarity of non-attachment, of non-thingness, or of things being by their very nature, not things, but actual perceptions of our own mental experience as humans, right? Then if you can perceive of that mind of clarity, unattached, constantly, 24/7, 365, right? Then you can begin to understand that that mind, that clarity, would never experience something such as birth or death, because, as we've spoken in the past, it's not just birth in a hospital, starting your calendar of human life, and death, your exit from it, but it's also the birth and death of every moment, because every moment is a creation, a validation of that database, which by its own nature is an invention of itself, your invention. So there's really nothing to birth or death, it's just a perception. Moving on. It also says, quote, emptiness is by nature removed from the sense organs and their objects. It has no form or boundaries beyond any futile theory. It is equal to space. It represents the ultimate in the absence of individual nature. So again, stating it in a different way, this is what I've been saying, is that in truth, none of it exists in and of itself. It is a construct. Starting to sound like the Matrix movies, right? But understand that in the Matrix movies, there was still a great creator there, somebody who wrote the program. In Buddhism, there is no such thing. It is simply the process of life. It is you and I and every other sentient and insentient being playing their part in this mental exercise of understanding attachment versus unattachment. Life affirming versus life unaffirming. Right? It also says, quote, the Buddha Mahavarachana addressed the Master of Secrets saying, Master of Secrets, what is the meaning of enlightenment? It means to understand one's own mind as it truly is. There it is stated again in another way. The Flower Garland Sutra states, quote, among the various beings of all the different worlds, there are few who seek to practice the vehicle of the voice hearers. There are still fewer who seek to that of the cause awakened ones, learning and realization here. And those who seek the great vehicle are extremely rare. To seek the great vehicle is relatively easy to do, but to believe in the doctrines of this sutra is difficult in the extreme. Well, from our conversation so far, that's obvious. Am I running out of space here? No? Okay. And how much more difficult it is to uphold this sutra, keep its teachings correctly in mind, practice them as directed, and understand their true meaning. Whew, a mouthful, right? To take the major world systems and hold it on the top of your head without moving for the space of a kalpa, is not such a difficult thing to do. But to believe in the doctrines of this sutra is difficult in the extreme. To offer utensils for comfort for the space of a kalpa, to all the living beings who are as countless as the dust particles of major world systems will not gain one much merit. But to believe in the doctrines of this sutra will gain one merit in great quantity. To hold 10 Buddha lands in the palm of one's hand and remain stationary in the midst of the air for the space of a kalpa is not so difficult to do. But to believe in the doctrines of this sutra is difficult in the extreme. He's making quite a point here, right? To offer utensils for comfort for the space of a kalpa to all the living beings who are as countless as the dust particles of those 10 Buddha lands will not gain one much merit, but to believe in the doctrines of this sutra will gain one merit in great quantity. For the space of a kalpa one may honor and give alms to the various thus come ones who are as countless as the dust particles of those 10 Buddha lands, but if one can accept and abide by the doctrines of this chapter, one will gain vastly greater merit. So here's another illusion, by the way, I'll remind you, of the thus come ones, the Buddhas, who are as countless as dust particles. Why? Because they're personifications of each and every one of ours Buddha mind. They're not actual people, right? They're concepts. Moving on. The Nirvana Sutra says, quote, although the various correct and equal sutras of the great vehicle will bring inestimable merit, there is no way to describe how much greater is the merit gained through this sutra, the Lotus. It is 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times greater in a way that is beyond calculation or simile. Good man, milk comes from a cow. Cream is made from milk. Curdled milk is made from cream. Butter is made from curdled milk. And ghee is made from butter. Ghee is the finest of all. Clarified. Which is interesting, clarified butter. One who eats it will be cured of all illnesses. Speaking of the teaching. Just as if all kinds of medicinal properties were contained in it. Good man, the Buddha is like this, the Buddha mind. The Buddha brought forth the 12 divisions of discourse. From among these 12 divisions he brought forth the sutras. From among the sutras he brought forth the correct and equal sutras. From the correct and equal he brought forth the doctrine of Prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom. And from the Prajnaparamita he brought forth the Nirvana Sutra. The Nirvana Sutra is comparable to the ghee. Ghee here is a metaphor for the Buddha nature. And the Nirvana refers to, the whole Nirvana Sutra refers to the Lotus Sutra. It just substantiates the following and the practice of it. When we compare these sutra passages that I have just quoted with those of the Lotus Sutra that describe it as the greatest among the sutras the Buddha has preached, now preaches, and will preach, quote unquote, and deal with the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts, the latter stand out like the bright moon beside the stars, or Mount Sumeru beside the other 8 mountains ranges that surround it. And yet, Cheng Quan of the Flower Garland School, Tu En of the Dharma Characteristic Schools, Chi Sang of the Three Treatises School, and Kobo of the True Word School, all men who were believed to possess the Buddha eye, did not understand the above passages of the Lotus Sutra. How, then, could the ordinary scholars of the time, who appeared to be quite blind, be expected to judge the difference between the Lotus Sutra and other sutras? The difference is as plain as black and white, or Mount Sumeru side by side with a mustard seed. Yet these men go astray. It is hardly surprising, therefore, that they are also confused by principles that are as elusive as air. Unless one can perceive the relative profundity of the various writings, one cannot judge the worth of the principles they reveal. The passages from the 8 sutras quoted above appear in separate volumes and are out of sequence in terms of their relative depth. Since this makes it difficult to discern the worth of the various teachings, I will explain these passages to help the ignorant understand. Okay, so here we go. When it comes to kings, there are great kings and petty kings, and in any matter whatsoever, there are parts and there is the whole. We have talked about the simile of the 5 flavors of milk, but we must understand that this simile is being applied to Buddhist teachings as a whole, and when it is being applied to one part of those teachings. The 6 Paramita Sutras teaches that sentient beings can attain enlightenment, but it refuses to apply this to those without the nature of enlightenment. And of course it mentions nothing about the doctrine that Shakyamuni Buddha attained enlightenment countless ages in the past. Right? This is the lifetime of the Tathagata from the Lotus Sutra he's referring to here. The 6 Paramita Sutra cannot, in fact, even compare with the Nirvana Sutra, which compares itself with the ghee among the 5 flavors, much less with the theoretical and essential teachings of the Lotus Sutra. And yet the great teacher Kobo of Japan misled the above-quoted passage of the 6 Paramita Sutra, assigned the Lotus Sutra to the 4th flavor, or that of butter. If the so-called ghee of the Dharanis, wonderful and difficult to understand formulas, cannot even match the so-called gi of the Nirvana Sutra, then how could he possibly make such an obvious mistake? And yet he writes that, quote, the Buddhist teachers of China vied with one another to steal the gi, calling Tendai and others thieves. And in a boastful vein, he declares what a pity it is that the worthies of ancient times were not able to taste this gi. Putting all this aside, I will point out the truth for the sake of my followers. Because others do not choose to believe it now, they are persons who thereby form a reverse relation. By tasting a single drop, one can tell the flavor of the great ocean, and by observing a single flower in bloom, one can predict the advent of spring. One does not have to cross the water to far-off Sung, China, spend 3 years traveling to Eagle Peak in India, enter the palace of the Dragon King the way Nagarjuna did, visit Bodhisattva Maitreya in the Tushita heaven, and the Bodhisattva Asanga did, or be present at the 2 places and 3 assemblies wherein Shakyamuni preached the Lotus Sutra in order to judge the relative merits of the Buddha's lifetime teachings. It is said that snakes can tell 7 days in advance when a flood is going to occur. This is because they are akin to dragons who make the rain fall. Crows can tell what lucky or unlucky events are going to take place throughout the course of a year. This is because in the past existence they were diviners. Birds are better at flying than human beings. I, Nichiren, am better at judging the relative merits of sutras than Chen Quan of the Flower Garland Sutra, Chia Xiang of the 3 Treatises School, Tzu En of the Dharma Characteristics School, and Kobo of the True Word School. That is because I follow in the footsteps of the teachers Tendai and Dengyo. If Chen Quan and the others had not accepted the teachers of Tendai and Dengyo, how could they have expected to escape the sin of slandering the law? I, Nichiren, am the richest man in all of present-day Japan. I have dedicated my life to the Lotus Sutra, and my name will be handed down in ages to come. If one is lord of the great ocean, then all the gods of the various rivers will obey one. If one is king of Mount Sumeru, then the gods of the various other mountains cannot help but serve one. If a person fulfills the teachings of the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts of the Lotus Sutra, then even though he may not have read the entire body of sutras, all should follow him. In addition to the 3 pronouncements of the Buddha in the Treasure Tower chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the Devadatta chapter contains 2 enlightening admonitions. The first reveals that Devadatta will attain Buddhahood. Devadatta was a man of incorrigible disbelief, of the type called Ichantika, and yet it is predicted that he will in the future become a Buddha called Thus Come One Heavenly King. The 40 volumes of the Nirvana Sutra state that all beings, including the Ichantikas, possess the Buddha nature, but the actual proof of that is found in this chapter of the Lotus Sutra. There are countless other persons, such as the monk Sunakashatra or King Ajatashatru, who have committed the 5 cardinal sins and slandered the law, but Devadatta is cited as one example to represent all the countless others. He is the chief offender, and it is assumed that all lesser offenders will fare as he does. Thus, it is revealed that all those who commit the 5 or the 7 cardinal sins, or who slander the law, or who are Ichantikas inherently opposed to taking resolute mind and determination, will become Buddhas, just like Thus Come One. It's my page-turning karma. Heavenly King. Poison turns into sweet dew, the finest of all flavors. So, with that, we'll next cover the second admonition, but there's a lot to digest there, so I want to leave this video at this point. Make another one really soon, and really think on this. Think on not just the placement of the Lotus Sutra. I know that's a very big part of this opening of the eyes, but the meaning, the profundity of this Gosho is about the mental state of Buddha mind and how it's accessible to all of us, it's already extant. We just need to clear our illusionary attachment to thingness. And then once we reach that, a different kind of understanding of life, enlightenment, and all of the worlds we perceive becomes available to us. We see with clarity and equanimity. Anyway, until next time, thank you so much for listening. I love and appreciate all of you and your time. You help my practice grow infinitely. Thanks again. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. See you in the next one. Okay, bye.